What do you call something, the weather phenomenon, 1 second before the first lightning strike?
I'm Jason Miller, a full-time professional flight instructor. On the Finer Points channel, you can join me as I bring you tips and tricks that I've learned from 20 years on the flight line. Hello aviators, welcome back to the Finer Points. It's a little bit rainy here in the desert today. It's got me thinking about weather. I'm fortunate enough to be sheltering in place here at my mother-in-law's, where there's a golf course in the community. I can get outside and walk, but it is a rainy day. And I don't know if you guys have seen, but I'm live on Instagram every day, Monday through Friday at 0900 Pacific. And last week I had a chance to sit down with former National Weather Service meteorologist Scott Denstadt, who's also a CFI, so he's uniquely positioned to talk about weather as it relates to pilots. And he and I talked about a couple of my no-goes. I have 4 no-goes, especially when I'm flying IFR, personal minimums that I do not stretch. And 2 of them I think you have to know, all right? Or at least be a part of the conversation so you can tell me what you think in the comments. But I don't fly or file IFR when there are significant yellow radar returns along my route of flight. In 1968, the Air Force did a research project called Project Rough Rider, where they took a bunch of fighter jets, they equipped them with sensors and flew them into the heart of the biggest, baddest thunderstorms they could find in Oklahoma. And what they learned was the amount of air movement that's required to hold up the moisture that would produce a yellow radar return can potentially be aircraft damaging. Now, early in my life, I had a girlfriend's father die in an in-flight breakup, so it put it on my radar quick that we can't normalize deviant behavior. And if you really don't want to be the person that flies into a thunderstorm, you have to avoid flying at least IFR on those days where thunderstorms exist. And so one of the things I got into with Scott was, when does a thunderstorm become a thunderstorm, and what does a yellow radar return actually mean? I didn't post this full video because there were some technical issues. It was only my 3rd YouTube live ever. If you want to see the full video, flaws and all, it's up on Patreon. But this part, the audio is clean enough, and I really want you to hear what Scott had to say about this.
It's a big, broad topic, Jason, because when you start looking at all the details, I find that pilots trip themselves up in a bunch of different ways. So instead of trying to create a kind of a blanket answer to that question, let me talk about one specific thing I think pilots are missing. So what do you call something, the weather phenomenon, 1 second before the first lightning strike? What's that called? Can't call it a thunderstorm, can you? Because a thunderstorm requires lightning, so it's not a thunderstorm. It's called a rain shower.
Right.
So a rain shower is that thing that happens. So, for instance, if you're looking at the forecast and it's calling for showers in the vicinity or rain showers, or even if you sit down and watch your local TV weather guy or gal and says, "Hey, this is going to be some rain showers this afternoon," they're talking about a convective process. So when you see showery precip, it's a convective process. Just because it doesn't have lightning doesn't mean it isn't dangerous. So showery precipitation is a convective process. I don't think most pilots really appreciate that. So when you're doing your pre-flight briefing, take note of the word showers, because it's really important. And the other aspect of this is that when that lightning strike hits, then we call that a thunderstorm. But in fact, that thing is just as dangerous before that first lightning strike. So don't use lightning as a key indicator of dangerous convective turbulence, showery precip. And the other aspect of this, too, is forecasters that forecast for a terminal forecast, they're your local weather forecast office meteorologist, not somebody sitting at a desk behind in D.C. or something like that. They're actually local to your area. And they will often put in a showery forecast, a showers in vicinity or rain showers, as a placeholder for a uncertain convective event. So let's say the chances of thunderstorms are not really all that great. There's not a big weather system moving in. The thunderstorm potential is very, very much on the lighter side. And what they'll do a lot of times is they'll put a placeholder for showers in to let you know that it's a convective process in place. So often once the weather evolves and once you get to a point where we start to see actually real convection and thunderstorms moving in, they'll amend the TAF and put thunderstorms in the forecast. So showery precip should be a red flag.
What do I mean by significant yellow radar returns? Well, look at this image here. You know, if I were flying from, say, Palm Springs to Las Vegas, I understand that I'm flying in an atmosphere that can produce severe convection, as you can see over here in the LA area, but I'm also flying away from it and I don't see any of that stuff along my route of flight, so that would not be a no-go. Nor would this picture here down in Florida, flying from through something like this. But what you have to understand is you're flying in an atmosphere that's in a transition potentially. I mean, how do you know when that yellow becomes a red, becomes a purple? How do you know when the green becomes a yellow? And all of the information you're seeing in the airplane, all of the radar information, is by definition old. It's old news. Something's different at that point, and you know you're in an atmosphere that can produce trouble.
Right. Ultimately, you're trying to answer the question, is this a convective process in place? And if it is, you should avoid even yellow or even sometimes green. And what you really need to look at too, and especially true of even instrument pilots, is that you try to stay visual as much as you can. Because even though you might be seeing yellow on there, the picture outside of the cockpit really is the determining factor. And yes, if you have onboard radar, you can that'll help out certainly as well. But ultimately, when you're looking outside the window and you see these billowing cumulus, very hard edge clouds, like cauliflower-looking clouds, and if they are a significant depth, more than 15,000 feet in depth, those are the kind you want to avoid, because I've seen situations where I've circumnavigated around an area of building cumulus. By the time I got around to the other side, it changed from green to red to magenta in terms of color. So they build very rapidly. Some thunderstorms can build at a rate of 6,000 feet per minute. So when you're looking at that, I don't know how many airplanes can climb at that rate.
The other no-go that I want to talk to you about is that I don't fly IFR in light airplanes that don't have icing equipment below freezing temperatures, all right? If the freezing levels are at or below the MEAs, I don't go unless I've got an airplane that's approved for flight into known icing. I know some of you are flying in the Midwest or other places where that would seriously limit your flying, so happy to talk about it in the comments, but for me, that's one way of being sure that I'm never going to be the guy that ices up out there, and unless I have the right airplane with the right equipment. So it was interesting to hear a meteorologist, like Scott, somebody who knows weather that well, and as long as I had him on the show, I was definitely going to talk to him about that.
Certainly ice in general is a concern for all aircraft. I mean, for the most part, there's been no aircraft certified into that super cool large drop icing situation. Airliners fly into that situation under a waiver. They've never been technically certified into those conditions. They operate under a waiver. All other aircraft that have certified ice protection systems, like your twin turboprops and such like that, or even singles, are allowed to get into what's called small drop icing scenarios. And so small drop is essentially what they call the median volumetric diameter of all the drops in there. And they find the median size drop, and that median drop is less than 50 microns. That's considered a small drop environment. And just as an understanding is that the size of a human hair, or diameter of human hair, is 100 microns. So when these drops just get just to about the size of half of a size of human hair, just barely visible to the naked eye, that's a large drop scenario. So you have to understand that the aircraft flying in that situation, even with certified ice protection systems, are only there to get through it, to get on top or get below it, not fly in it for any length of time, unless they're a jet, which has that bleed air system, which really works really well in all icing conditions. All other aircraft, smaller aircraft, really don't belong in those situations, don't belong in the ice, in the clouds at temperatures below freezing, unless they have a certified ice protection system, and that means that they should only be there as little as possible in terms of time.
All right, aviators, that's all for this episode of The Finer Points. Huge thanks to Scott Denstadt for coming on the show. You can find out more about Scott if you go to avwxworkshops.com. Also, huge thanks to the sponsors for their support of this show and to the patrons. That's just huge. And if you want over 180, I think there's about 183 bonus videos there now on Patreon. In addition to all the archives of my weekly live sessions, please go to patreon.com/learntfp. If you'd like a free gift video, my story, don't repeat the mistakes I've made, come to learnthefinerpoints.com. And a huge thanks to you, the best fans on the internet, for watching this video. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, do all that YouTube stuff. And until next time, be safe and fly your best.